Frequency fam, we're live again. I have missed you all. It's been a while, but we're coming back into a point where I think we'll be able to do some regular IG lives again. So tonight's topic is going to be about weight loss. And I think this is something even more relevant for the past 3 years than it has ever been before. I think we'll have a packed house tonight because this subject has been one that has received a lot of attention. Some of you are familiar with the Chinese medicine patches that I have been posting and recently talking about how I have lost 18 pounds. I pushed through the first 10 pounds and then had a plateau that I hit. And then recently I dropped these last 8 pounds in the last, month and a half since last month. So I have nearly created the same results with some of the addition of what I'm doing now that it took me well over 6 months to achieve when I first kind of started targeting the goal of wanting to drop some pounds. Mind you, I hit the plateau, so I wasn't even losing any more than those 10 pounds initially. It wasn't something I was pushing, past. I wasn't able to do that no matter kind of what restrictions I had. Or at least if I did kind of make some headway, you all know that battle, right? Like you see some benefit and then you kind of go backwards, right? But now I'm happy to say that I only see the scale moving down. Not to say that it's all about the scale by any means, but in being able to assess the progress and moving in the direction that I wanted to, I've been able to see that incorporating the use of the magnets with this new therapy that I have created, as well as using the Chinese medicine patches, which is not just Chinese medicine as in herbal medicine, but strategically where it's being placed in the body to really have an even more profound effect. I mean, it's almost like it became too easy. And I don't say that lightly because I know that weight loss can be a very hard goal. And the last thing someone wants to hear is how easy it is for somebody else when it's been so challenging for them. I was almost in that category for a minute thinking, oh, great. Am I really going to fall into this? It's going to be harder for you from now on, because before it was always okay. Once I got serious about trying to lose weight, it would come off, right? And I got to a point thinking like, maybe that's it. My run on that kind of luck is up. But no, it's not. I'm back and I feel amazing. I'm not looking to get back to my former dimensions, but I am pretty much just a hop skip away from that. But I'm good where I'm at right now, and I've gotten to meet my goal and beat my goal simply by adding some of these new things into the mix. With that said, I don't want to just talk about what I have done, but some of the things I see as trends in general over the last 3 years that have really created weight loss as an issue that seems to be much more paramount now than it was prior. I mean, it's probably always been something on the table, but in the last 3 years, we've really seen that become that much more harder, that much more expressed by our clientele, that it's that much harder to do. So let me go through and look at some of these comments, and then we'll get started on today's. Oh, Angela, you like my red. Red is a good color to wear. It catches our attention. Get this, if you want to know the physics behind things. Red is going to be the longest wavelength. So the reason why we typically seem to like red or be attracted to red is because it appears the closest to us. So that's kind of why it can really attract attention. That's why we use red for, grabbing attention, like a stoplight, for example. We use red to really kind of get attention because it actually appears the most closest to us. That's why it captivates, and that's why it seems to be a very carnal or sexual type of color with it, because it kind of has that closest draw, right? The energy, the vortex of that appears, or we experience that as much closer than other colors. Okay, so yes, let's go ahead and probably get started here. First of all, I just want to preface by saying that we are going to give away a test kit tonight. So we're back on it. We give away a free test kit, which is a $400 value, and one lucky winner is going to win it. How do you win it? Well, you win it by simply making a comment. That way we know that you actually attended here. And by the end of the live, we'll be going through and picking one of these winners to receive the $400 test kit. You'll get to test with Root Cause Clinic absolutely free. And if weight loss is a concern of yours, you can list that on your client intake, and we will run extra scans to look at and see what might exactly be behind your story as to why that is a challenging area for you. But we're going to talk about some generalized themes and things that I have seen. So let's go ahead and just make sure I've gotten everything. Deanna's also in the chat too, everybody, my other half here at RCC. And so if there's any questions that I may not get to here on some of the things I might mention, she will be the one that you'll probably see answering here on my behalf. But I will try to look at these comments and make sure that I catch up with them. Just sometimes if I am talking about something, I don't want to get off on a tangent because I will go off on all of them. So I usually keep a list to keep me focused for that reason precisely. Looks like someone has made a comment that pre-2020 that they were always thin. That has been a theme. So first of all, how many people identify with that statement? That particularly these last 3 years, and not just because that perhaps we were more shut in, but just even after we've tried to get back to normal life, we just aren't budging the weight the way that we would before. Becoming almost potentially seriously concerned that something might be wrong because of how tough it's been to lose weight. Who identifies with that category? Let's scroll up into lifetime and see. Hey, Deanna. Love the idea of Chinese patches. Interesting. I can't wait to talk about them. I mean, they are absolutely amazing. Congrats on my weight loss. Thank you. And Amber's in here. We have quite a few providers joining tonight as well. Last 3 years have been bad for weight. Yes, everybody seems to really kind of be feeling the same thing. All right. Okay, well, you're in the right spot, so let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is that elephant in the room that has been what has been going on over the last 3 years. And this can include organically having been exposed to this, and also other ways that we've gotten exposed to this. And so I think you all know what I'm referencing here. I'm trying to be a little bit more careful with how and what I say, only because I am so severely banned and Root Cause Clinic has been so severely punished for some of the information that we say that it is like literally 95 or 97% down and who can see our page because of that. So we want to make sure that we give the valuable information, but we do it in a way that may be a little bit smarter. And so with that particular issue that we have faced over the last 3 years, I want to talk about the nature of the epithelial tissue, which is a very big target in the dynamic of what we're dealing with that spike protein. So this particular type of inflammation that kicks off, because our tissues are so heavily comprised, there is so much of this tissue in the body, it begins to create the inflammatory dynamic. But what it does is it will recruit histamine to initially do that. Because this is such an expansive and such a saturated effect throughout the body, one of the trends that we see at the clinic is that eventually we come to a point where that there's just no more money in the bank to keep spending. AKA that histamine becomes something that becomes much more stressed in being able to produce. That may sound like it's a good thing because you think histamine has some negative associations with it, and if we can't make it, we can't feel the symptoms or have the inflammation and problem solved, right? No, actually it's the complete opposite. I have never seen more amounts of histamine issues, which are oftentimes again labeled as histamine intolerance. I have a whole new theory on that, which is called histamine resistance. It's something different. I'll get to that in a moment. But this is something that is exploding. I can't tell you how many different types of people, all types of people, from celebrities to your common Joe Blow, that are getting issues in the tissues when it comes to histamine. All coinky-dinky in response to either genuinely having had, again, this thing or having been subjected to it, via another entry point. And so what happens is we'll oftentimes see that estrogen becomes skewed. Progesterone can become skewed. Estrogen in particular is a currency that recruits water, right? It recruits bloating. And that is no accident here. We're looking at this and thinking that estrogen is a problem, but really it's part of the solution the body is trying to bring to the table. So if we're doing things that are targeting the breakdown of estrogen or looking at estrogen as part of the villain here, what is going on is that as we deplete the histamine levels and they cannot work or we're not able to be sensitized to them, meaning we have the black card American Express, but nobody takes American Express, so kind of in that case, we're still broke at the end of the day, the body's gonna say, okay, well, I gotta use something. And estrogen is really good for allowing the suspension of the fluid dynamic. And it will begin to utilize that as a second best choice. Now, it's not utilizing that for the gonad or the hormone reasons that we might, associate with reproduction or, hormones in general, especially with women having a higher amount of estrogen, seeing that that is tied to usually what we consider estrogen dominance. Then these people go and do what? They go take things like DIM, which helps to break down estrogen, or they go do things to help target the estrogen, and they report that they feel worse. And they're confused because their labs come back, supposedly that this is a problem. So why would they feel bad when they break this down, right? Well, because the body has chosen to do this, not because it's a fool, but because it's a better than solution than something else. So then we end up with two issues here. We start ending up with issues with estrogen, right? Because it is using estrogen to replace histamine. So now estrogen that we have to try to do histamine's job, which it's not really equipped to do in the first place, is trying to do that. We're trying to use a fork instead of a spatula to flip the burger. Not exactly a good look. But two, now estrogen is too prominent and having a too great of an exertion effect in other tissues because it wasn't designed to have to be there in the way that it is now doing to fill this extra role. And so when we, again, try to target the estrogen, the body rebels. It says, are you kidding me? Do you realize what I'm doing here for you? And we create even a secondary inflammation effect. And all the while, we still haven't solved the original issue, which is the fact that we bled out our ability to use histamine. Now, mind you, progesterone ratio to estrogen is also important here. So you mess with estrogen, and guess what else becomes problematic? Progesterone. Progesterone is not just to get pregnant. It is actually important in being able to have a relaxant or dilative effect within your neuromuscular junction. There's individuals that will have issues simply because they have become progesterone resistant. And what's more, progesterone also interacts with that same receptor that histamine does. So you'll oftentimes see progesterone, estrogen, and histamine issues all related. Those of you who have histamine issues, isn't the menstrual cycle the worst time for you, right? Or right around the time that you're approaching it? It's because all of that business is going down and all those transactions are happening in the same area. And so we start messing with Peter, we start messing with Paul, and you can see how this becomes a big issue. Now, how do we fix it? I actually have an opposite approach. And some of you have heard me speak about this before. Some of you may have seen some of the cases that I've helped, literally where we've brought people on here to talk about they're not appeasing their histamine issues anymore. They're simply just butter. And that is because instead of saying, histamine, you're a bad boy and you're doing things that aren't good, what we're doing is we're saying histamine isn't being read. Let's get it read. We use frequencies to help sensitize the receptors again so that they might be able to read the histamine. And guess what this does? It helps the body to stop creating so much of it, okay? It's like insulin resistance. Don't think that only insulin is on a pedestal and only insulin can be something that we become resistant to. Anything stands to become resistant. In fact, guess what? Thyroid issues? You might have perfect thyroid labs, but maybe your thyroid hormone is not working for anything because it's the tissues where it's supposed to be actually uptake and used, and that includes almost pretty much every cell in the whole entire body. If they're not taking it up, then you basically don't have thyroid hormone, right? In any which case and form, resistance is the issue that mostly is what we look at whenever we're seeing problems that aren't explained in blood work, when we're looking beyond the blood work. And in this case with histamine, once we help the body actually start using it, we make it more sensitive, just like you would with insulin, then we have a better metabolic effect. The answer, just like with insulin, is not made better by giving more insulin to an insulin-resistant person. I mean, obviously, if somebody's life is in jeopardy, then we are using that. But the idea being is that it compounds the problem, right? So those of you that are on histamine protocols where you're trying to just eliminate the histamine from the diet, take enzymes to break the histamine down, take natural antioxidants to help with buffering the inflammatory effects from it, and you're basically doing everything you can to squash it, you end up in a catch-22 cycle where you could be making it worse. So I do want to look at what has happened the last 3 years in the way of the endothelial tissues where a lot of the release of histamine is happening, and how that we are ending up in this dynamic where that there's a ton more histamine issues than we ever saw before. How this recruits estrogen and progesterone into the mix, why it's worse at our time of our menstrual cycles. And men will even have these problems too. So again, just because that women have a greater amount of the estrogen doesn't mean that they're the only victims here. Men will also have this, and it will affect their testosterone because as estrogen actually becomes disproportionate, this is going to create issues with their testosterone. It's also going to create issues with sleep because as it affects progesterone, this affects your sleep. Progesterone is a relaxant effect. I kind of attribute it, even though nothing is exclusively parasympathetic or sympathetic, it does a lot of parasympathetic regulation. So if progesterone is in the dumps, you can pretty much assume that a lot of your parasympathetic function will be as well. Now with parasympathetic function, there's two splits. We have what's called the dorsal version and a ventral version when it comes to what the parasympathetic outreach can do. One is that nice kumbaya, rest and digest, really something we evolved from to kind of learn that talking and communication and community was a way out of dealing with actual fighting. If you could talk your way out of a situation, you didn't have to throw blows. So if you were a good orator and you could get out of a fight with a big, 6'2" person when you here are half that size, that could save your life. That's an evolution of the parasympathetic system. What it originally began with was not that. What it originally began with was a freeze response. So we had two options at the onset. It was to fight, right? Literally, or flight, or a freeze response. Why might that be good? Well, think about what we see in rodents, for example. If we have a rat, do you think that he can go head and tail with a dog, a cat? Probably not, right? Or a hawk? It's probably best to just not be detected. And so the freeze response that we'll see in a lot of animals of prey is something that we also have when it comes to people. It's just usually not as much of a first tier response. It's usually something triggered once we've exhausted the ability to fight or flight. But this is something that is also life-saving in its own means. So when we look at the parasympathetic function, depending on the unique situation that you have going on inside of you, you might end up causing issues with either a parasympathetic in the dorsal or the freeze state response, and or it could be something that could stimulate and or impact the ability to have the positive associated type of ventral response where it has that rest and digest effect. For the most part, I don't see it having that effect. I see it having a freeze response. And so guess what that means? You could be trying to do parasympathetic stimulating work, which is supposed to help you with weight loss, which is supposed to help you with all these problems. And do you realize it's actually making it worse? Yeah. So all the vagal tone exercises or things of that nature could actually be making the weight loss issues worse. Not because that's going to be the case for everybody. There's a lot of unique things we want to look at to make sure if that is the window that you fit into. But I can't tell you how many people are not in a fight or flight state. They're in a freeze state. They have pushed beyond the fight or flight state. So why are they so addicted to kind of stressing themselves out? People blame them and say, you're looking for it. You always want to kind of be stressed out. You're exaggerating. No, that's literally self-medication. The body wants you to come into a fight or flight response because that's actually a step up from being in a freeze state. And so it's trying to bring you back into homeostasis, into that ventral portion, the good portion of parasympathetic. But to do that, it has to cross through the fight or flight response. So you may find yourself naturally agitated, moody, kind of aggressive. This is literally something that is there for a reason, right? And we're going to get into emotional stuff here today as well. But that is one thing I wanted to bring up. Let me look at some of these comments and then I will get into the next section, which I think is going to blow everybody's minds. I think you guys are going to love what I have to say on the next thing. Let's read some of your comments. Okay. Just join. What is the topic about? The topic is about weight loss tonight. Couldn't wait for this live. Glad that you are enjoying. Been looking forward to this topic. Estrogen, disproportionate estrogen. Wish you had my knowledge. To be honest, everybody, I don't think I have anything extra special than anybody else. I just have an intense desire to learn. There is a Nobel laureate, Richard Feynman, who he actually has some very beautiful videos that he put out. Well, he didn't put them out, but they're of him speaking, and it was assembled in a really beautiful way that when asked, could the average person, ordinary man, ever hope to understand the great scaffolding of the work that he had done? Because he was a Nobel laureate. He'd won a Nobel Prize as a physicist. He said, of course, I was just an ordinary person with great desire. So what do we call a scientist, really? It's just somebody who has had enough desire to go through and do the learning, right? There's different motivations for that. And some of those motivations lead us to get a title on the wall that is a diploma. But that desire doesn't have to culminate in a diploma. It can culminate in another outlook that just still brings you to that answer. It doesn't have to be a prerequisite. If you have the desire, your ability to learn and what you can understand, what you collect is as good as the desire, not the diploma. During ovulation and menstrual cycle, you see a lot of worsening. You've missed these so much. I've missed all of you too. Decreased progesterone causes gut inflammation, constipation. Yes, it can. Progesterone can have a very big effect, or lack of progesterone, I should say, on issues like chronic pain. Chronic pain can be related to it. Again, it's more of a delayed effect in the body. So if you don't have proper progesterone levels, or if you're not receptive or you're not reading it, you can literally have this tightness and this contortion, if you will. You'll also end up getting, a lot of times autonomic nervous system imbalances, just as I've mentioned. Okay, so looks like someone has said, I've noticed even my fascia, dimples, and cellulite have increased post-exposure. Is that something you've seen in your patients? Oh yeah, that has been a big one. And that is going down to a lot of things. So I'll come to that. I'll come back to that one later. I'm just trying to make sure I honor some of these comments here. So many histamine issues in the people in the past few years. Yes, okay. All right, let me come back into live time. And then let's get started on the next subject. And that is actually going to be melanin modulation. So what does melanin have to do with weight loss? So if we look at melanin, this is associated with pigment, right? First of all, did many of you happen to know that melanin is actually literally a natural binder? It is essentially a reservoir where we will trap toxins. That is why things with melanin or things like mushrooms have this potency effect against toxicity. They're able to help regulate our natural ability to deal with toxicity. Isn't it interesting that melanin is a byproduct of our exposure to the sun? Now, if you look in many circles, there's a big debate over whether or not the sun is good, right, or bad, whether it's a friend or a foe. They tell you that it can cause melanoma. That's a long story. It's never as simple as just this is the answer, right? Now, in the course, Physics Meets Physiology, I have a whole segment where I go into this and I bring the studies in the evidence-based medicine and actually show you 2 studies that were actually executed by the American Skin Cancer Foundation. And one of them says and speaks to how that UV radiation can actually help kill cancer, and the other actually obviously is the one that was associated with selling sunscreen, telling you that UV can actually cause cancer. The same organization, right? I believe it was them, but it was a very major prominent society that we talked about, or organization. So let's talk about that a little bit. It is my belief that we do not have, because of issues such as diet, stress, toxicity, both whether it's stuff that we can ingest or what's around us or what's invisible, such as the radiation that we have, we are changing our state. And in changing our state, we are changing the way we deal with the sun. Okay, that is a whole different topic to have. So can sunlight exposure end up being attributed or have you a correlation that you can add up with things like melanoma? You can, but guess what? There's a lot more to that picture, because hormones are also involved in melanin signaling. So if we've got issues that are already in the tissues going on there, if you're getting the sunlight, it's really just the messenger, right, who ends up maybe delivering this. But it's a story that starts long before that, because we in fact do see that UV light has a lot of ability to regulate the immune system. And we see that the melanin production is a natural byproduct of our encounters with the sun. So what does this have to do with weight loss? Well, many of us will notice that some time in the sun does as well. We seem to not only look thinner because we're darker or we're getting a tan, but we notice that when we're out there in the sun, we can get away with things maybe we don't necessarily get away with when we're indoors. We notice that we can eat more and we don't necessarily gain the weight. The sun just seems to energize us, right? So when we look at that, when we really, really look at that, go into the depths of the research that, guess what? They're not even putting out there so much in some of the mainstream studies, but the stuff you have to go look and see, what are they getting patents for? When people want to know why I get the cool research that no one else is talking about, I don't just go to PubMed, although I do pull studies from there, but I look for the patents. Who is spending money on something that is something they don't want other people to have? Or they buy information that they plan to potentially use and make a lot of money off of. Either way, if they're putting a patent on it, if they're trying to protect it, there's something there worth looking at. And when we do that, we actually look and we see that keratinocytes, right, which is about 95% of your epidermis or the top layer of your skin, is comprised of the ability to make glutamate. People don't realize that. So our top layer of our skin can create an excitatory chemistry. If this is able to be within proximity, within the melanocytes, it can actually stimulate not just the melanin, but it can stimulate some of the rogue components that can happen with it, such as things like melanoma. So if we have issues in the tissues, right, things that are going on there, that can be how we end up having issues regulating our relationship with the sun. What kind of things could you think about that we put on ourselves on a daily basis that might be perhaps influencing 95% of the epidermis of the body? Could it be things we purposely put on ourselves, like beauty and hygiene and grooming products or self-care? Could it be what we do when we step out and we have the different atmospheric gases touching us? Could it be the radiation that we're subjected to? Could it be what we're eating? All of it, right? And so this matters in general. It's not just a past 3 years type of thing, but an accumulative thing that we've come into having a problem with, right? But what about when we have issues where that we have excitatory issues? We're not just gaining weight, but we're actually nervous Nellies. We're hyperstimulated, but our metabolism isn't. Geez, wouldn't it be nice to switch those up, right? This can come down to issues in the tissues. Modulating the way that your melanin is triggered has a lot more to do than just the pigment that can come out as a result of it. So things like melasma, hyperpigmentation, and weight loss issues are actually related. It's no coincidence we might start seeing liver spots, lipomas, angiomas, things like that, abnormalities that are coming out of the skin in response to metabolic issues. So what is a way that we can target weight loss without really targeting our metabolism is to target your epidermis. What are you putting on your skin? What kind of information is going into your skin? For that, I don't recommend going into any of these lighteners or these chemicals that will go in and try to turn off the melanin, because melanin, again, as I've explained, is protective until that it becomes disordered because of issues in the tissues, and in which case it's not protective anymore. Melanin is actually something that can be triggered by other types of toxins such as mold. It can be something that we've seen very much targeted in what's also went on in the last 3 years. So there's another skewed dynamic, and I actually have some screens I want to share with you so you can see. So let me pull those up right now. If it lets me, if Instagram, oh, here we go. Okay, so let's take a look first of all at when we look at melanocyte stimulating hormone. What other things this is involved in? We see tubular reabsorption, so how we actually push filtrate through the kidneys and purify this so that it can become the clean blood that we need. We've spent the last 3 years thinking about the ACE receptor and what that has to do, right, with the spike protein and how that's explaining a lot of the issues we have in the blood, in the kidneys, etc. Well, what about this dynamic that we have going on in the actual tissues? Where does any of that exposure actually come to? Who is the first Marine on deck to find that threat and do something about it? Whether or not you're exposed organically and it's coming through here, or here, it goes through an epithelial tissue. It goes through a epidermal tissue. It goes through the keratinocytes, right? So there's a whole other way of looking at how this disorder actually gets out of control. Beyond just the obvious, right? Blood pressure control issues, right? And of course, that would control things like fluid in the body in general. Maybe you don't have blood pressure issues, but maybe it's coming out in stagnation nonetheless. That's one thing I wanted to share. Let me share the next. Let's actually take a look at this one here. So when you look at glutamate receptors, just as I mentioned, glutamate, look at all that glutamate popping up. Did you ever expect to be talking about glutamate and excitatory chemistry when it came to keratinocytes? You thought, God, these are just the things that are on top of my skin or what makes up my hair, etc. Interesting that everybody's getting hair loss issues, or a lot of people are getting hair loss issues, right? And also, there's quite a few people which are developing nail issues. In fact, I was given information that a certain area in Michigan, who likely received a certain batch of vaccines, because not all of them are the same, different batches might reflect different concentrations of toxoids, okay? Toxoid being the active factor that we're trying to issue the response against. And without coincidence, there is a concentration of individuals in that area that are having some similar effects, which were seemingly very rare in the distribution of all the different types of side effects that we've seen in response to that, if you know what I mean. And it is nail deterioration, keratinocytes. Interesting. So by using our skin, our largest organ, this is actually a means to apply correction in the area where it may have went wrong to begin with. What we're taking in the inside may not really be the pathway to deliver that message. I have one more screen I want to show, then I'm going to get into the next subject here and just make sure I also didn't miss anything in this topic. Oh, it put me back on. All right, let's go to this last screen. You'll notice that when we talk about the keratinocytes, we also bring up what are called proline-rich proteins. If any of you attended the lecture I did about the nature of what I was seeing in long haulers and the things I believe that were involved in that, you'll know that one of the things I talked about that helps with recovery were something called proline-rich polypeptides. And that is because if you are getting the synthetic mRNA, that actually has been genetically manipulated. As in, they had to do that because mRNA itself is so provocative to the immune system response, it won't make it to the cell. It won't make it to the cell to load that spike protein so that it will go inside and use the cell to pimp it out to proliferate. It won't even get to that point. So they had to alter it in its genetic sequence to be able to kind of slip it under the radar so that it wouldn't actually trigger the immune response right away until it could get into the cell. Well, it just so turns out that in the areas that this was manipulated with proline also is what is involved in cancer, what is involved in our PRP53. And if we look and we also see some of those levels and what's been going on there and just the rapid nature of how we're going and seeing cases from a stage 1 escalate to a stage 4 within the same month, no less, there's some correlation there that I find interesting. Now that could be a whole other topic, right? What we talk about there. But what does this mean for us when it comes to weight loss? Proteins. So if we are changing the way that we are able to signal our proteins, specifically with our PRP53, which controls rogue behavior of these proteins, then that's going to change a lot of things for us. We're not going to be speaking the same language or being on the same page anymore. Not only can we get some of these nefarious outcomes, in general, communication in the metabolic sphere isn't going to do what it needs to do, no matter what you put into the mix, no matter what you're eating. So getting your gene signaling and looking at the template that we have is also very important. If you haven't done that, if you have had either this or you've organically have had over the last 3 years COVID, you want to look at taking some things which help to kind of put this back into alignment. Again, I can go into a full other scope as far as people that even haven't had this, how that they might still be affected by that, but that's a whole other discussion. Let me take this off and look at some of the questions and actually make sure I also talked about everything I wanted to in this subject. Oh, another thing that puts us at risk. Synthetic software, I talk about this in the course. So if we're exposed to devices, okay, this is giving us a certain wavelength. The wavelength is a specific type of instruction. We can have devices which mimic nature's law, like we can use blue light, such as those of you who might be neonatal nurses and or doctors, you'll know that blue light can be used to help babies with jaundice because we're using it in lieu of how nature would kind of use it. When we actually create these synthetic perverted versions of it, it can create synthetic perverted results. Blue light is actually bioaccumulative. That means you don't ever detox it. If you're getting certain wavelengths of blue light, it's going to accumulate forever. It's not leaving. Think about how we've had this evolution of devices over the last 20 years and think about all the anxiety problems, all the insomnia problems, and guess who are the number one takers of sleeping pills and sleeping aids? Not the elderly. Gen Z. Gen Z. They're also the loneliest generation and the most likely to respond now with side effects to anesthesia. Interesting, right? So we want to make sure that we are getting that proper sunlight. But if you're doing that, and perhaps you're not the perfect canvas for it and afraid that it could turn into one of these rogue templates that I talked about, there's things that we want to do, things that you want to put on the skin to be able to make sure that at the very minimum, you're giving yourself what you need to have that proper response. Some of my favorites actually include topical phytochemicals. There's a product from Herbal Face Food that I love, the serum, although a bit pricey to be using all over the body. I like it on my face, but for everyday use or for all over the body, I usually kind of just put together my group of essential oils and I'll change it up depending what I have, what bottle I want to get, rid of. And I'll mix it with hyaluronic acid. I'll mix it with the hydrosol of choice. You can use things like witch hazel. So I like some sort of fluid and or water-based ingredient. And then I will use some sort of a oil. So you can use a carrier oil. You can use jojoba. Many people might like some fractionated coconut oil. Personally, and for those of you who also have the doTERRA LRP group membership with the education, you'll see that I also put ema oil as one of my favorites. It is the closest to the natural sebum that we emit. And so this will be the most likely to spread evenly and diffusely through that epidermis level. And that's really the key because you don't want, let's say that you have dehydrated cells and tissues. You don't want all of one area grabbing all of the volatiles and then the other area having nothing. That's how we get reactions. You're trapping too much of one thing in one area. You want an even distribution. So for that, I like to put a little bit of hyaluronic acid. So we're working with water or a hydration effect as well as the liposome or the fat effect. Using those together with whatever oils it is that you have. Some of my favorites for that, and I talked about this in the Beauty Beyond the Botox. I like using, where did I write them down? First of all, vitamin C is a good one too. You can actually add in just some vitamin C powder, which you can, add in at the time that you're mixing everything else that I'm about to say. So geranium, that one's a good one. Also, anybody that might be having any type of brain fog, geranium's actually also got a patent on it by the The Agriculture Department of Israel, they have a patent to try to get that marketed into being used for Alzheimer's disease. So go figure, that doubles up there. I actually love to put that on when I'm studying or I'm learning because it just kind of helps facilitate and make that a lot easier. Frankincense, the king of oils, amazing for brightening as well. And also that's really great for inhibiting cancer. I have that in the veterinary oil segment that I just did. That is a really good one if you've got any pets as well that may have any type of abnormal growths. If your pupper is growing a bunch of fatty growths, lipomas, if you've got moles, if you've got spots, if you have, things that could even be mutagenic in nature, such as things with melanoma. Am I telling you frankincense is going to cure melanoma? I'm not saying that, so don't say that. Don't go tell everybody I said that. I didn't say that. But that is something that can be really great for a lot of these issues. Sandalwood is amazing at brightening, and so is rose, lemon, and tea tree. Now, why do I like using plants instead of using chemicals? Plants are chemicals, okay? They're nature's chemistry. The thing about them is that they're always subtly changing and evolving their information, and it's something that we're biocompatible with. So this is a software that our body reads. It's designed to read, right? And I'm not against using technology to help process or manipulate them in ways that can better preserve them or better help them to be applied. But ultimately using this as a currency to help our body to learn how to properly deal with its environment is literally the way and design that we are supposed to work. We eat in season. Why are we supposed to eat in season? The sunlight that received from our environment is meant to grow that specific plant, which then contains its specific information, which we then eat as an update, a literal software update about what's going on in the environment and how our body should be responding, the information it needs to be appropriately calibrated to the environment. Everything works on this continuum, coming from the top cosmology into planet Earth, into our environment, into our localized environment, all the way down to the micro level. Using plants is exactly the plan. Different plants will have different types of information, wavelengths, etc. Depending what we're trying to incorporate can make particular types of information interchanges between us and our environment. I don't have any fear of going in the sun. I don't even burn in the sun. I can go out in the sun for quite a bit of time. Why? Because I do this. I put some sort of shield on with the essential oils or with herbal face food or whatever dynamic I have that I want to use that incorporates the phytochemistry to be protective of this melanin immune system response, because ultimately that's what melanin is. It's an immune system response. That's why it's associated, again, with helping us with things that would assault the immune system, such as buffering that and not allowing that to have to go boom into their face and sequestering some of these things. So I think that's enough with that talk. Next. So we talked about why we want to put things on the skin, right? Versus what we're going to take internally. That is because we absorb so much of what comes in from the skin. And that is the way that many problems come into our body. So that is the way that we also need to fix the problem. If this is where we became hypersensitized, right, because of everything that is coming into the body, or even with the invisible things like the radiation, it's coming through here and tensing your tissues. It's creating a tension here, right? This isn't necessarily a metabolic issue. It becomes one as that tissue tension comes inward and tenses everything. But if you start here, it didn't begin here. So if you take supplements here, you fix this, but this is a problem because of what came in this way, right? And the thing is, the more that there's tension here, the more that we build up here. Guess what? That actually changes your cellular metabolism because we're going to store the not good stuff, the bad stuff in fat. So we will grow more, we will not make more fat cells, but we will grow our fat cells to accommodate the toxicity. Your body's not going to let you lose fat if it's like, are you kidding me, girl? Would you prefer this go in your nervous system? Because this kind of looks very similar. Nervous system tissue is a lot of fat too. Be careful what you wish for, because I'll totally put it there if you want, but then you may not remember who you are in a couple years, right? Interesting, all the MS, all the ALS, all the neurodegenerative disorders that we're having, right? And even when we do a gut-based approach for them, it doesn't necessarily always work, right? It's the tissues. The tissues do stuff. And if I can make one point about the intelligence of the tissues as really kind of being the supreme intelligence of the human existence. In fact, if you look at some neuroscientists, they believe the microtubules or the cytoskeleton of our tissues is actually where consciousness emerges from. It's a whole other talk about them in the course. But think about this. Can anybody spell for me? Can you say out loud, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious? Can you just say it? Can you just spell it off the cuff? Can you? Or are you trying to write it down right now? Because if that's the case, what that's saying is the body remembers that. The memory is first in the body, the hand, the writing. You have to commit the motion to be able to remember that. It doesn't just come from brain here out sputtering, right? Maybe some stuff does, the more simple stuff. But the tissues are who hold that intelligence. We need to turn everything around and look at the tissues when it comes to everything. The tension held in the tissues. You're not going to get rid of the fat if it's the one help buffering all of this other stuff. And that brings me to my next point, which is sometimes you have to detox your actual fat before that you can get rid of it. Your liver is who has to break this down. If it has to break down the fat, which is already a job, and then the fat is also toxic, it's kind of like you have some cleaners come over to your house and they're expecting to do the routine cleaning. And they show up and this is like a ransacked place that a tenant who, bitter for having been evicted, has left a disaster. Are they going to come up and still complete that 2-hour job? Are they going to come and say, oh crap, what the hell? Are you serious? I can't do all this in 2 hours. I'm sorry. I'll do the project, but you are going to have to work with me here because I cannot do this. This was not part of the original deal. So it will not burn that fat because it cannot. It's too much work. And also it cannot do that because it cannot liberate all this toxicity into the organ systems. It has to slow it down. So clean your fat up first. One of my favorite products for that, and one of the things that I actually took is, let me find it here, Lipotox. And we actually have our own new shop now that you can shop. You don't even need to work with Root Cause Clinic. You just simply have to be a member on our private site. Once you create that membership through Shopify, we have an entire store with thousands of products. So you can actually get this without even working with Root Cause Clinic. Just make sure that you're coming into and being a member of our site. So Lipotox, this here, is specifically oriented at detoxing your fat. If you are in a plateau, get this, okay? Clean up your fat, give your liver a break, and let it be able to just break down the fat and not all of the junk that's with it. So clean up your fat cells. That will also help speed up your metabolism and stop the cycle of storing so much of your energy as fat, because guess what happens? The bigger that your fat cells get, the more that they start changing the amount the food or calories or energy that's coming in that goes toward what is currently used and what is stored. So it's going to say, instead of 70-80% of this energy that just came in from this meal being used for you to have actual energy, not just for how you feel, but for your cellular processes, it's going to say 70-80% of that is not going to go to you. It's going to go to being stored as fat. This world is very scary. I better give you some reserves. And you get the 30%. So you feel like you're starving, but your thyroid's normal, but you keep gaining weight. Well, why? Because of what I just said. So clean your fat. And if there's just one last thing I can say on that before I get to the next subject, how many of you have had any type of gastric bypass or any surgeries? You lost weight rapidly, right? Because of the nature of what was done to you. But have you ever noticed how many of these people seem to have a lot of decrepit dark circles? I mean, they look like many of them have went to hell and back, right? Okay, they lost the weight, but my gosh, what the heck? Well, their liver has essentially been forced to get with all those toxins, and that went straight back into the body. And it's not uncommon that we sometimes see some serious issues and health problems develop after that somebody has done one of these surgeries, even if they've lost that weight. There's a reason why your body chooses to lose weight slowly, because of what might be in that fat. If you push it and say, I know it's better than you, body, it's going to have the last laugh. And it's not one that you want to be on either side of. So going into now what we take internally. Metabolic. If you're taking supplements, herbal medicine, etc., to help with metabolic processes and it's not working, or worse yet, you're like, I'm gaining weight. Let's just think about this very simply. At the end of the day, why does the liver do what it does? At the end of the day, why does the gastrointestinal system do the chemistry it does? It does this to hand it off to a cell, right? Ultimately, the single little cell, so that the mitochondria can take that last bit, like a nuclear reactor, and create some actual energy, literal energy for your cell. So if that part's not working, guess what? No cigar. if you have mitochondrial dysfunction, and you don't necessarily have to have complete chronic fatigue, bedbound mitochondrial dysfunction to have an issue. But if you have mitochondrial sluggishness, for any of the reasons that we previously talked about, whenever that all of these processes come to that penultimate moment in the cell to say, okay, here you go, slugger, do your job, and it doesn't do the job, well, what happens? We don't just disappear all these resources. The body's like, I'm sorry, I did all of this work. We are not wasting this. So it turns it right back around, hands it back to your metabolism. The metabolism's like, what? Like, I thought I did this work for you. And they're like, well, we're not ready for it. We'll tell you when we're ready for you. We're starved of energy in the cell because we didn't produce it, right? So not only do we have energy deficiency, we also don't have the proper energy to allow waste excretion from those cells. And it goes back to the metabolism. The metabolism now cannot do more work, right? It's being held up. So it gets bogged down. If you're having issues and you're taking metabolic supplements and they're not working, add something to help with your mitochondria. One of my favorite things for that, actually, there's two ways you can do that. MetaPower from doTERRA has been very successful. There's a lot of testimonials. So if you need some collagen as well, if you're looking to lose some weight, know that there's some insulin resistance. That's an easy way to kind of add something into the mix. But there's also another one from Co-Gardens that we have at the clinic. I'll put it up on the stories after. This is a nanoparticleized mitochondrial stimulant. This goes straight into the cell. It does not require any digestion, does not need your metabolism whatsoever. It is even superior to a liposomal absorption. It goes into the cell. Before you start thinking that nanoparticleizations are all negative things, nothing is exclusively good or bad. It's about what's coming in with the nanoparticle. If this is something that's not good, then yeah, it's not good. You're taking something not good into the cell. If it's something you need in the cell and the metabolism is no longer the key of entry to do that because of what I just said, this is the way to bypass that. Maybe your gut's a mess. Do you ever think that all the supplements you're taking might not actually be getting where they need to go to the cell? So the Co-Gardens, the Recharge mitochondrial support is yet another great thing to really synergize anything that you may be taking in the way of herbal medicine, vitamin supplements to help you with getting the mitochondria in sync with the metabolism. We also have a scan at Root Cause Clinic, which helps look at the entire cell and really stimulate the portions from different types of cell membrane responses to receptors, to the cytoplasm, the structure inside the water of the cell. Hyaluronic acid is a favorite of mine for that reason, because it quite literally is what allows your cell to structure that water. You've heard all about structured water, right? What allows the structure and the geometry that's invisible to come into the world of chemistry, the molecular world? Hyaluronic acid, heparin sulfate, chondroitin sulfate. They're called GAGs. They're literally what allow the crystallization to happen. So that's another way that we can keep space in our cells so that the processes that I'm talking about, the things can go in and out. If we have dehydrated cells, if we're not getting things in the cells and they are these collapsed cells, we do not have the ability to let things out or in, and we don't get energy. We don't get energy, it gets sent back where it came from. And that's an issue, because what happens when the body does that? Oh, I can't use this right now. I'm going to have to slow down and figure out what I'm going to do here. Oh, and by the way, I can't work as many hours now because I'm dealing with trying to find out what I'm going to do with this energy. You know what? Let's just go ahead and store this. Then we'll come back to it. Store, right? Okay, so we've talked about that. The last one I want to talk about now is emotions. And so the patches that I recommended, the Chinese medicine patches, they are so powerful in my opinion because they don't just promote physical detox, but emotional detox. You talk all about the lymph and how this drains into the blood, and then the liver cleans it, and then there's the kidneys and there's the colon, and all of this talk about how we align our toxicity pathways to be detoxed. And that's important, right? But it's not just about the physical, it's about the software that runs it. Stress is considered a number one by proxy killer. So what is stress? Stress is what we feel, right? It's not a physical thing, it's what we feel. So what we feel, whether it's stress or whether it's any of the variety of human emotions that we have, they create physiological effects. So we know that much, right? Feelings can become flesh, and I go into depth about that in the course about how that actually happens. I literally show you the physics and dynamics of tension and force fields and how that this creates issues in the tissues that then unfold the proteins or interrupt cellular signaling or send light going in different directions than it was supposed to be, creating autoimmune disease and the like. That's a whole other conversation. But when we look at this and you think about the feelings involved, right? Where does the detox of the feelings go? Like eventually your liver gets around to that exposure of the Febreze that really kind of rubbed you the wrong way, like somehow works that out, right? Well, where are your emotions going? How are you detoxing them? If you're not, you need to do an emotional detox. That's exactly what I did. And I did that with these patches. I've done some magnet work. I'll get into that next. And that's when the pounds just came off. We work in energy medicine, okay? I've done the emotional tinctures from root cause. And the first 10 pounds I lost, I didn't do anything. I didn't change anything different. Only at the point that I was at the 10 pounds where I was at the plateau, I said, let me just try to lower the calories here a little bit and see if that can push me ahead. And again, it didn't work, right? But the first 10 pounds I lost just doing kind of the basic standard things, right? Just being consistent with it again, because I had not for the 2 to 3 years before with all the mayhem of starting Root Cause Clinic. But then there was only so far I could push, right? And that's where, while I was doing the emotional work in the tinctures, it came to me that you should prepare your pathways the same way that you should prepare your pathways for a parasite cleanse, right? The same way you should prepare your pathways for detoxing heavy metals, detoxing from mold. You should do that for emotions. So these particular patches that I like do just that. They're Chinese medicine patches which have metabolism, metabolic boosting herbs. And they also have what we need to clear physical pathways, such as helping to remove a lot of mucus. Let me tell you, for the first week, and those of you who I've had appointments with, you know you can verify for this firsthand. I asked to excuse myself, give me 5 minutes, because I kept going to the restroom. Not because of just constant bowel movements, but because of all the mucus I was shedding. And that's what really helped to lower that lower belly fat that I had that was resistant, and I wasn't losing. Even when I lost the first 10 pounds, I didn't lose any of the lower belly fat. It was still, boop, there. Now it's finally burning off. Losing all of that mucoid inflammation, right? So we can look at that as a physical detox, and it is. There's part of the herbs that are doing that. But we also can look at that area in lieu of subtle energy. This daimai, or reservoir, that is this girdle belt that is right here, is quite literally where all what are called the extraordinary vessels dump into all of our triggers and our trauma and our tension from anything related to our emotional environment. So if you are not working in this area, then you are trying to do protocols without having done the preliminary work. It's the same equivalent. It's just not in the physical, it's in the emotive sphere. There's a lot of techniques that we can use there. Tapping can be one of them. There's specific magnet therapies that I do. And in fact, there's going to be a new TAM touch therapy, which is related to the etheric anatomical model, which is the model that I feature in the course. And so there's a specific magnet therapy that we have, which will work with the extraordinary vessels, which will work with the meridians, which will work with the chakras. It incorporates biogeometry, it incorporates meridian flushing, incorporates crystals, etc., essential oils, and how we can use touch therapy, actual contraction and expansion. Why does touch matter so much? Touch matters, and we know that a baby, even if you give them everything that they need, we've seen this can have lethal effects if they are not touched, right? Because contraction and expansion rule creation. What is touch if it's not contraction and expansion? We touch only that we pull away. There is contraction and expansion. Contraction, expansion is what births life, if you know what I mean. You need some rhythm to conceive, right? Contraction, expansion is what we birth a child into the world. Mothers, you know exactly all about that. Contraction, expansion is the same rule of physics that we have for our heart to beat. It's considered a vital sign that indicates whether or not we are alive, right? Well, guess what else does that? Your lungs, right? Contraction and expansion. That is our life force. We have to have air. We have to be able to breathe to be alive, right? Well, guess what else does that? Your gut, contraction and expansion, peristalsis, so that you may eat and acquire nutrients, that you have energy and thrive. Guess what else does that? Your muscles, contraction, expansion, right? Your cells, your very single cell, contraction and expansion in the form of its vibration. So touch therapy is the most powerful thing that we have. We have specific techniques that we teach with this, and tapping as well, that incorporate the use of the magnets. Now, what are we doing with the extraordinary vessels? Everybody's familiar with the meridians. This is a Chinese medicine component that kind of tells us our energy superhighways, right? Certain meridians are responsible for certain things, certain emotions, certain elements, etc. That's all fine and dandy, and it's very important. But that is the byproduct of what you come into the world with, your generational software, and your personal experience in the outside world in your environment. That's what the meridians end up becoming. Before even the meridians form, there's actually some constellations that are the extraordinary vessels. If we were to look at the formation, the first formation of energy sparks in the creation of an embryo, you would actually see the alignment of the extraordinary vessels, little points that as the creation actually envelopes, you start getting lines and connections between the points. From there only do we get the meridians outwardly. The extraordinary vessels are where we get our generational programming that we inherit from our ancestors. Things that we don't necessarily have any choice about. Why do we like certain things and we don't like others? Why are some people completely able to be independent with no qualms and others are completely codependent? It's not just the nurture environment of our experiences. That of course impacts it, right? That would be the governing of the governance of the meridians. But if there's something that's deeper, or we want to impact not what has happened to us, but how we deal with what happens to us, you need to work with the extraordinary vessels. Working with the extraordinary vessels, like the Daimai, which is the literal trash bucket of all the emotional toxicity, and what governs all these extraordinary vessels and how that they gauge whether or not you'll be a person that looks at taking 20 minutes to wash your face and do a skincare regimen as something that is, kidding me? Like, I don't have time to be doing superficial stuff like that. Versus somebody who's like, I will take 40 minutes and do it, and I deserve more time than that. Why do some people feel certain ways about certain things? Depending on how energy is tensed here, what you come in, the container you come into actually deal with energy interchanges, this is where we can correct some of those things. This is where, and even though in Chinese medicine it said that this is your pre-heaven essence and you can't correct it or do anything about it, I've actually shown that you can. So by working with our magnets, by working with the yin and yang component of the magnet, because it's not just a positive, negative, north and south, you can literally extrapolate this to parasympathetic, sympathetic, yin, yang, and you can use these accordingly to stimulate the vessels, to do the release. And if there's anybody here that actually attended the retreat, and I haven't been keeping on the questions, I will look at them in a minute. If there's anybody who attended the retreat and did any of the magnet therapy, feel free to make some comments here and let people know what you experienced when you did so. We had some very profound releases where people instantaneously, problems that they have had, things that they have struggled with for decades, just became resolute and clear by working with these extraordinary vessels. Very, very, very powerful. So if there's one message I can evoke here is that we need to do emotional detox. I've kind of thought about maybe starting a self-care circle where we kind of do these things, have these talks and support each other. And perhaps after we get through this month, we might be able to find the time to do that. If you're interested in something like that, let us know. Otherwise, I think I have covered it. We talked about the patches. If you are interested in the patches, you should be able to get them starting this week in the store. We need to load them. We had a problem with them selling out because they sold out of like 3 different places because they're so popular now. That should speak to the testament of how well they're working. But we should have some more in stock this week, and you can shop online. I will make an announcement when those are available online. If not, sign up for a waiting list to be notified when they do become available. There's a waiting list, I think, of like 100 people already or more, and it keeps growing. So be the first to get those. I will say, it does say to change the patches every day. I don't. I actually will leave them on for a few days at a time because I notice that the effects still stay for a couple days. If you get a little bit overstimulated, you may have to take them off at night. I don't. I leave them on 24/7, so that could be part of why also I've had this supercharged response. Since doing the patches, I have found that I am, even though I'm a metal element and I'm pretty cool as a cucumber and able to really balance my emotions well, or my emotional behavior, I have found that things that would normally kind of at least come up at front and create a trigger or create a tension moment have just been something that I kind of let go over me because I am working on the emotional detox. Once you toss stuff out of the trash, there's more room to put more trash in. So whatever those triggers or things that would normally be a problem, because there's literally no more room to shove it in, so there's resistance, and as we shove it into the trash, it falls out the side. Now there's a lot of space for it. It's cool. We can handle it, right? So using these in the specific points, which are listed on the leaflet, will be also part of the equation. It's not just what's on the patch, it's where you're using it. You are constantly triggering specific acupoints to have that information that govern these type of processes. It's not just what we take internally, right? That's kind of the byproduct of everything. So supplements that we take internally, if these aren't working for you, you need to look from the outside in. Tissues, the ultimate intelligence of the body. And this includes transdermal patches, as in things that we're looking to get delivered through the actual skin, and correct things through the way that they normally come into the mix. How do we actually become affected to begin with? It comes in through some type of epithelial tissue at some point, right? And magnets, which I've talked about as well. Okay, so I missed probably a lot of questions. Let me see if I can catch up on some stuff and see if there's anything else that I might be able to shed light on. Magnets and emotional detox, yes. So actually I don't have any of the magnets with me. I have them all taped up on my husband right now, and some of them put away somewhere else. I should have had some. I will do another live where I talk a little bit about magnets for those of you who might want to be interested in learning further about it, and how I work with the extraordinary vessels, the meridians, and we incorporate all these things that I just talked about, how you can use magnets in the very straightforward ways, such as for pain. Like I've used with my husband, who had, some severe pain that he was dealing with, and within just one night of the magnets, I taped a bunch of magnets on him in the specific ways. You can't just different portions of the magnet and working with them in different ways have different effects. So you do have to know what you're doing. But in just one night, he was relieved of pain. He's a believer, right? Now he is. You get things to work for men, and they will be, they'll ask about it subtly, like, oh yeah, you do a magnet therapy on me? Yeah, because it works, right? And that means that you get to go do the things that you want to do because it makes a little bit more sense now, right? More flies with honey than with vinegar. Okay, let's answer some of these questions. Being an element. Oh yes. Oh my gosh. I have to do a whole live on that. So the elements, I think, are the biggest tool that you could ever have to understanding your story, why you have come to the point that you have, what moves you, where you belong, and where you're going. All of the element distribution contributes to the fabric that is creation, right? It's actually all from the same source, but they're different angles of it, or they're different gradients of it. They're different, manifestations of the same thing. But there are the 5 elements in Chinese medicine, and Ayurveda has its elements. The ancient Greeks had its elements. In fact, there's different ways that this appears throughout different cultures. But in working with the elements, we can understand things that we like and things that we don't like, because it helps us to understand our natural rhythm. Each of us has a natural rhythm. You may get 5 people assigned to a task, and if these are all different dominant elements, one may choose to do the task this way or be motivated to do the task this way. Another one may execute it this way, etc. So understanding our elements helps us to understand our relationships with ourselves, with others, with our coworkers, and how to really achieve things without coming out of our rhythm, but at the same time, not being afraid to challenge ourselves. It's not just about, well, this ain't my rhythm, I'm not doing it. You have to be able to understand your flow so you realize how you're going to accommodate, work with, or interchange other types of flows. I'm a metal element as well as a water element. I'm actually dead even Steven. Many people will have at least one strong element. Some will have 2, and some people are actually super well balanced, and they may have like 3 or more that might show up equally. We have a quiz that you can take, which will go through and help you to understand your element. And I will definitely have an IG live where we go through and talk about that a little bit more, because it can influence everything from what kind of clothes look good on you to what type of jewelry looks good on you to, how you might like your home, or what kind of home you may feel most comfortable in, what cities you may like to live in, and how and what type of romantic partners we might want to have, just everything. I mean, it really helps you define the rhythm of your life. It's a big aha moment that will put everything into perspective. I love it. My most probably fascinating thing that I have ever come across. All right. I know, I heard there's an elements movie now. How funny is that? How funny is that? This live will be saved. Yes, we will get to trying to post that quiz potentially online and talk a little bit about how we can balance elements, doing some Bach flowers, essential oils, magnets. Those can all be used to help balance our elements. And it also helps us to understand how we balance trauma. So for those of you who got to see the retreat virtually, let me just see, I'm still okay in time. Yeah, I'll wrap it up here and pick the winner in just a moment. Those of you who attended the retreat virtually, the emotional healing retreat that we had, you saw the lectures that I gave where I went and I broke down the stages of trauma, right? How that we will actually have a pattern in which that first there is a detector, right, response. So we're detecting that there's a threat. And then there's the actual pushing of the button that says, okay, threat, all right, do something. And then there's the actual solicitation of the response to the threat. Then there's the completion of the event, meaning, okay, we literally just beat somebody up, but it's over now and we're like coming to the closure of that event. And then there's the kind of digestion of that, which is like, wow, that just happened. Jeez, what did I learn from that? I'm not going to talk to people that way anymore because they will come at me. Okay. So we have a full cycle. It's like grief. There's a cycle of grief, right? There's a cycle with trauma. And depending what kind of element we are, we're more prone to get stuck in some of these phases than others. Let's say you're a fire element or a predominant fire element. You're a person that loves the new and exciting. You love to get out there. And when you have a problem, you don't want to dwell on it, talk about it. You're not the Debbie Downer. You're like, I want to go to the club, or I want to go to the great restaurant. I want to dance. I want to listen to music. Let's have some drinks, right? You want to just move past it. You want to forget about it by moving on to the next, new and exciting, shiny ball syndrome. So this is great because you can be resilient, but also you fail to ever process anything. You leave a door open all the time because you jump to open the next one. And this will have issues within the heart, the small intestine, a lot of inflammatory issues, fire issues, because that's the element associated with those systems. There can also be overstimulation. We can tend to burn hot in relationships and equally burn just as hot when we actually end them. That's just one dynamic, right? We may have somebody else who could be a more earth element. And that individual may have went through the whole process. It's over. Now they're safe, but they still can't get over how humanity had an action like that against them. They just can't digest this, the last step, and get over it and work through it. And hence the enteric gut is where that will sit. They'll get the dampness issues, the gut issues. That's going to be an issue that may look different for that fire, right? It may look different for the water. It may look different for the wood element, who might start getting a bunch of skin issues, fibromyalgia or tissues or nodules, chronic pain, joint issues. It looks different. It looks different in the emotional sphere, the processing sphere, as well as the physical manifestations of that. Knowing your rhythm helps you understand where you're already vulnerable and where that cookie will crumble for the weakest link. And it can help you also know how to move that trauma, how to move that tension, what tools you need to use. Trauma work is not just everybody, let's just do some generalized work and we're just going to release, our trauma. You have to understand how it came in, how the tensing and the tension actually occurred to know how to actually let that out. All right, I can keep going on this. Let's actually pick our winner. Deanna, I'm going to go through and answer some questions while you pick today's winner. There is one lucky winner who will win a $400 test kit with Root Cause Clinic. We'll do some weight loss and mitochondria scans for you, Chinese medicine scans, and there's actually going to be a new scan rolling out, which is the TAM Touch Therapy, which will incorporate all these things. We're going to be having magnets available for those of you interested at Root Cause Clinic. You can actually see which ones are appropriate for you based on the gal's strength and the size. In the scan, we have incorporated them now into the technology. You will know which side of the magnet to be using, so there's no guesswork. You will know exactly what to do. Those of you who react to your protocols and you can't take anything, this is a great step to fix the polarity issues. You've been asking me for so long, how do we work on polarity? Magnets are something that are cheap and you can continue to do yourself. And this can be the groundbreaking work you need to respond in the way that you need to for the rest of your protocols. We're going to feature that now. All right, so Deanna's going to announce the winner if she didn't already. I'm scrolling up. Let me see. Okay, yeah, we have went. You know me, I can keep going. What hyaluronic acid and essential oils can we apply underarm, for example? Claire Labs makes a good hyaluronic acid. You just need a couple pumps of that. And again, you can use that with any type of witch hazel or other aloe vera type of medium. The hyaluronic acid, again, is going to give the structure. So you don't have to use the whole thing full of hyaluronic acid. You just have a couple little bits of that. And then concentration ratio, you can put more of the witch hazel or more of the aloe vera or another kind of liquid, space-giving, but water-based type of ingredient, and then put a little bit of oil, and then you can add in the essential oils to that. I have a glass container where whatever oils that I'm like, okay, I've got a little bit of this one left. I want to get rid of the bottle so I can, use the fresh one or just use the oils and not let them just sit open. I will put them into this mix. I'll just put them in, and I'm always rotating and using different things depending on what I need, skin concerns I have going at the time, emotional qualities as well. You can use essential oils for their vibrational qualities for emotional release. For example, putting a little bit of jasmine oil if you have any type of issues with intimacy. It can also work the other way for sex addiction. that can actually be very powerful as a vibrational kind of institution to help either way, whichever end of the spectrum. If your yin or yang is imbalanced in this, it can look different, right? One is inhibitory, one is outwardly expressive. You can use essential oils, and they have an armor effect, not just for the phytochemistry, but for the actual emotional qualities as well. All right, who won today? Okay, we have announced the winner. Yes, we have. Perfect. My Nunez, are you on to claim your prize? Let's see here. Yes, she is. Perfect. All right, well, write us in so we can get you your test kit sent out. I will answer a few questions here, and we'll have to have a part 2, a part 3, a part 4. Feels so good to be back, everybody. I've missed you all. We've got so many things to talk about, right? Okay, let me answer a couple questions. And Deanna, thank you so much for answering everybody that I did not get to answer about all these logistics questions, how we actually take all this stuff I talk about, and what do we do about it? How do we do it, right? Let's hit a couple questions here. We've asked, let's see, should new drainage pathways are open or not? Yeah, that is a way that many times we can go down some of the more chronic health issues, is that when we started doing this kind of work, without doing the preemptive work. The same thing for the emotional work. You start doing a lot of these other things for emotional release and you didn't dump the trash. Well, that's also not going to be a good look. The same way it's not if you try to push a parasite cleanse through somebody that never prepared for it. TEM touch therapy is the therapy related to the magnet work. Love to hear I'm the only one now hopping on. Wondering if there's stock currently. Sweating, pooping. Oh, great. Deanna did a lot of work already answering a lot of this here for me. Ooh, Wellness Trinity, my girl. She does some great tuning forks. If you don't follow her, check her out. We have to team up again and do another event. This is exactly what you've been talking about with your clients. You have to tune your drainage, organs, and glands. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. How do you know if your drainage path? A lot of questions about that. Okay. Answer a few more. What is that? What is that HA you use on your body? I have Claire Labs, and I'll put, like I said, I'll put, depending on, because this is always a work in progress with what I'm adding there, but I will put in a certain portion of the hyaluronic acid from Claire Labs. I'll have witch hazel, or sometimes you'll get a product and you're like, I didn't like this for my face, but guess what? It's still good for the body. This is my little constant ever in work. I don't waste, put it all into one, throw my essential oils in, and it's amazing. It sinks right into the skin. You're not greasy afterward, and your skin is just so soft, and it has a lot of actual other effects beyond just the physical. Oh, stem cell patches. Somebody asked about that. So we did also scan LifeWave patches into the system. These work based off of being able to stimulate your own endogenous stem cells via light. So those will be something you'll start seeing roll out as well. And yes, we will save this live. I think a lot of these are mostly logistics questions, and I think Deanna's already gotten them. So if you have any more questions, hit us up in our DMs. We'll be sure to get back to you and help you out, direct you in the right spot. And I will put up some things on stories regarding some of the products I mentioned and how to get them, everybody. If you didn't already, go sign up to be a member on our rootcauseclinic.co page, so that way you can have access to our shop where you can shop all these items and don't even need to have to come through and necessarily do the full experience with the provider. All right, everyone, I guess that's it for today. Let me scroll into real time and say goodbye to everybody. You will have to listen. Love my voice, so calming. Thank you. I actually had an iridology reading yesterday. Okay, see, this is the last thing I'm going to say. I promise everybody. I don't want to keep you from dinner. But we had an iridology session, Deanna and I, with Sume yesterday, and I'll share her page after this as well. She's going to be at the retreat, so for those of you who want to do any of the emotional work, oh my gosh, try to come to the retreat. If there's one thing that you can do if you want to do emotional work, do the retreat. We're going to be adding up some other superstars to this lineup. One of them is going to be Sume, who does a completely different type of iridology than you've ever seen anywhere else. She's incorporating a morphogenetic generational iridology. So she can literally get a picture of your eye, or do in person and capture this as well, and tell you things so crazy specific about your generational inheritance that I mean, your heart's gonna freeze. So we are going to incorporate this into the retreat that we have coming up, and it also has the ability to institute corrections. So alongside the magnet work where we work with generationally inherited templates, we're going to be working with iridology and the special work that Sume does as well. Lastly, we're adding in a structural specialist with Alina Kaner. Some of those of you have followed her or seen her on Dr. Jess's page. She does amazing work with the structural rehabilitation of the body. If there are structural issues, then we could be doing a lot of other stuff, but ultimately the geometry of the body, which is what structure in the space is, right, is going to inhibit or cap what we can do. So coming to this retreat, you're going to get to see some of the top specialists out there for all different aspects. We're going to have therapy for microcurrent neurofeedback, which helps clear the static from the brain if you have addiction issues or there's any type of autonomic nervous system dysfunction, insomnia, brain trauma. We have magnet therapy. Alina's going to be doing her structural work. We're going to be having the iridology, biocharger, emotion code and tapping that we have. Geez, did I forget anything, Deanna? I know that there's probably something I forgot. And of course, there's lectures every day. So I have a 5-day series of lectures where we talk and bring all the evidence-based approach to it. There's meals included, as well as the beautiful lodging where everybody has their own in-villa private dipping pool. So we can do, and breathing. How could I forget Kimberly? Oh my gosh, we're doing breathing exercises as well. Her voice is just so beautiful. And we do the toning. There's a sauna that we were all doing every night there. And just, it's just an experience that I already want to go back to. I miss everybody from the retreat, and I'm looking forward to the next one. It's a lot. I know. So there's so much. And we still, MCN, we still have some offers up. If you want to go check out the page, you can bring a guest, get a significant discount. And you can actually do 2 people to a room because there are king size beds. So if you bring a friend or bring a spouse, you can be able to do, not only healing for you, but really kind of hopefully get some better stick with that, because if you have your family or your friends or the field around you literally also engaging and getting on the same page with you, it's going to be that much more likely that you'll be able to make it stay that way. Okay, everyone. Yes, be subscribed to us so you can get in on the know. I will do another IG live next week. I will do one every week from now on because I miss you guys. Let's get back to doing this more often. Okay, everyone. Well, that's it. That's all I've got to say. Well, that's not all I got to say, but that's all I'm going to say for now. Bye.